Welcome to the Jack Westin MCAT podcast. We're your hosts, Azaii
and Molly Hudash.
You guys, I am so excited for today's podcast episode. Molly Hudash is back. I'm back, baby. Yes, you are. We are so excited to have you. It has been a bit. And I know that today's topic is something that we are both super excited about, something that's really important to both of us and that we think is important to our students. And why don't we just tell them what it's about? Not even hold the suspense. Let's do it. I mean, I feel like we would be remiss to not include a single drum roll, but drum roll. And now, right, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Azaii, because today we get to talk about how to get your mind right for your test date. Right. I know Azaii and I both work a lot with our MCAT course students, and I get this question all the time. Molly, I'm testing in a week. I'm testing in 2 weeks. Like, how should I go about this next little period of my life? How can I make sure that I'm ready for my exam and I don't burn myself out right before my test date? It's such a crucial question that we ask ourselves constantly. And I think that, both of us are really excited to be here and to be giving you guys a little bit of guidance in this really scary time that you guys are going through.
Absolutely. I'd argue that it's perhaps the most critical time aside from the very start. I feel like the very beginning and the very end are just so crucial. And it's one of those things that you can't overthink in the sense of you have to give it thought, right? And so you have to give it space to figure out what that's going to look like. When you're first starting off studying, that means sitting down and figuring out, okay, what's my game plan for the next couple of months, right? And with this, it's like, what's my game plan for this last week? How do I make this last week or two really count? And I know we're going to have some people listening who are thinking, okay, well, maybe this podcast episode doesn't apply to me because I'm not testing in a week. But we want to encourage you. There are still some things we're going to chat about super quick, but this is the kind of episode you're going to want to come back to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you guys who are here listening and saying, like as I said, oh, well, I'm not testing for a month or maybe two. I want you to know that there are things that you can do now that will make, the week before your exam a lot easier as well. So most of our episode is going to be geared towards, someone who's a week out. How can I get my head in the game, so to speak, right? But know that if you're relatively early in your prep, one, like as I said, you're in a very crucial stage, right? You want to be intentional about the way that you structure the next couple months of your prep, right? But also, let's say you're a month or two out, right? Make sure that you are planning out how your test day is going to go, taking your full lengths with the exact same schedule and environmental conditions that you will have on test day. That means don't check your phone in the middle of your exam and don't watch YouTube videos on your lunch break, right? Don't go chat with a bunch of people, right? Get your snacks you like. Make sure that you are, sitting outside, staring at the sun if you like that, doing whatever you plan to do on test day while you do your full lengths. And even outside of your full lengths, right? If you want, you can be structuring your studying really as early as your content phase in like hour and a half blocks, right? That's something that I tell my students all the time. You have to be ready to focus for an hour and a half straight without stopping or slowing when you take your exam, right? Get started on that as early as you can, right? It's really never too early for that. So that's something that I always like to encourage, right? Try and study with the same conditions as you're going to have on test day. And then when you're a week out, it won't be quite as scary because you'll feel like it's just another practice test in a lot of ways.
Yes. And I'm going to make a plug for a couple of other things that you can think about on test day. One is when you're thinking about what you're going to eat, don't plan big meals. So that's an easy way. I don't know about you, Molly, but if I have a big meal, I get so sleepy. Yeah. And all I want to do is just nap. And I think that's also what, at least personally, kind of contributes to my post-lunch, early afternoon kind of slump. And so on test day, one of the things that you can think about, and that means when you're doing your practice test, that means on days where you're just doing MCAT studying, is maybe more frequent, smaller meals. That might be something that you do on test day, right?
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about, and I know this wasn't initially what we were planning on spending more time on, so I'll be really brief about it. But when you're thinking about like, okay, what am I going to study on a given day? So I personally like to tell students, don't just sit down and do cars all day. Yes, I love cars, but you're not just going to have cars on test day. So sprinkle in a bit of science with some cars. Maybe start your day with Chem Phys, then do some cars. Maybe that day, you're going to be doing some biochem and psych soc. And so mix it up. Don't just do one topic the entire day or one section the entire day, because that's not test day. And so sprinkling those little things are helpful.
Totally. And I totally feel you on the eating smaller meals more regularly. That's just how I run. I crash if I haven't eaten a snack in like 25 minutes. So I definitely brought lots of snacks on test day. And that was something I planned early on. But also, right, you're exactly right in not just studying an hour and a half block, but also the flow of the exam. Because let's say your weakest area is Chem Phys. That's what scares you the most. You're always going to be going from Chem Phys to cars. Study in that way, because cars on test day, you're going to feel beaten down and exhausted because Chem Phys is your toughest, scariest subject. You want to be practicing cars in that same level or that same, emotional state that you will be on test day. So I love that. I've actually never really directly said that to a student, but Azaii, I think that is gold. Everyone, right? Write that down. Go do that. I think that's fantastic, especially leading up to your test day.
Yeah. And, we said that this podcast was really going to be about kind of like getting your head in the game, right? And that means a lot of things for different people. That might be, thinking about, okay, what does this mean in terms of like, what does this moment, this week represent, right? It might be, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? It might be, in terms of getting your head in the game, like, all right, how do I stay motivated? There are so many different facets of this that they're unique. They're about as unique as there are people listening to this podcast, right? And with that comes a lot of different feelings. I don't know about you, but I had a lot of feelings leading up to my test day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, stress in life forces people to react in so many different ways that really reflect the emotional state that they're in when that stressor is introduced. So if you are feeling really excited, right, and you experience this stressor of, hey, I'm about to take my exam, you might feel manic. You're like, hooray, it's almost over. Hooray, this is amazing. If you're really scared and you have that fear associated with this MCAT, you could spiral, right? This could be a really terrifying experience for you, or a terrifying period of your life. And I think the most important thing is to recognize how you're feeling, especially a week out, right? Okay, I'm feeling really nervous. I'm feeling unprepared, let's say. How can you craft the next 7 days leading up to your exam to make sure that you bring yourself back to that happy medium, right? How can you make sure that you are acknowledging all of the amazing, amazing hard work that you've been putting in over the past couple weeks or months or however long you've been prepping, right? How can you honor all of that time and energy spent? Because ultimately, I think you said this before, this last week, it is so crucial, right? The mindset that you have going in, to be honest, I think it's a more important determinant of your score of basically anything else you could do in that week, right? So I think taking some time, starting, maybe a week out, do some journaling, do some self-reflection, right? Come in and ask yourself, how am I feeling today? And how can I make sure that whatever emotions that I'm feeling that are positive, right, remain, but the ones that are holding me back or that are making me doubt myself, how can I make sure that, the next couple days addresses those emotions? They're real. I know they're real, you guys. We don't want them to hold you back on test day.
you read my mind. That's why I was just like, oh my gosh, yes. For anyone that was watching on YouTube or the video and just saw my intense reaction. It's because it's like you've got to find a way to acknowledge those feelings that you're having. And journaling is a huge way to do that. It's also worth recognizing that not everyone is big on writing. Some people, you might just be talking with a friend and just be like, listen, I'm stressed. And you can have that person kind of reflect to you or reflect back to you, like everything you've put into it. Right.
Yeah.
You can, in addition, not everyone has that same kind of support system where they can just vent about the MCAT. But something else that you can do is just kind of find something that eases your like emotional state, right? Not just like quieting your thoughts, but like something that brings you joy. And one of my favorite questions to ask people that, either I'm like getting to know or just like even sometimes when I'm having conversation with patients or with friends, like what has brought you genuine joy the last week? Not like momentary happiness, right? And not like, and that doesn't, those moments of joy, of true like fulfillment don't take away from the negative experiences you've had either, right? But it kind of redirects your thoughts. And it's a way of acknowledging like, yeah, maybe this week as a whole wasn't great, but there was like this little pocket, and this little pocket brought me joy. And so that's a way that you can kind of like get yourself back to that happy medium, right?
Totally.
And so they're just like all these tiny little things that we can do. And something I would be a little scared, or actually a little anxious if she did. But I have a friend. I don't think she's listening, but she knows I love her to pieces. One of the things that she and I had talked about a while back, and every so often we check in with each other about, is just like actually writing down things we're grateful for, and just like little gratitude notes, just for ourselves. And it's something that you can look back to when you're having those moments of stress and of frustration. You acknowledge like, yeah, I'm all over the place right now. Let me go back and see some of the things I've been grateful for the last couple of weeks, days. I know I've been on a rant, but
that is so sweet. I just have to tell you, Azaii, you're like totally just shot me right in the heart in the best way with the what is something you've done that has brought you genuine joy. You want to know my thing? What has brought me genuine joy in the past week, Azaii? Being here with you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I wish I could have called Azaii right before my test. That would have been amazing. But you're exactly right. Trying to find a way to, it's almost to find a way to calm your mind and your body so that you can engage with these feelings of fear or anxiety without feeling them take over. If it's being with a friend, if it's ranting, if it's being in nature, whatever it is, right? Finding something that brings peace, right? It kind of quiets the raging thoughts and emotions that you have when you think of the MCAT, right? It allows you to engage with it without feeling overwhelmed. And you also touched on the fact that, a lot of us have people that we would want to call. I would call you Azaii, but not all of us do. And one thing that I want to mention, right, because we're talking about journaling, and you're right, not everyone wants to journal. One thing that I actually do that I've done many times in my life, it's my own weird little quirky way to calm myself down. I actually start a voice recording. If I can't call someone, something about the feeling like this is being recorded, I'm like, okay, I better get my thoughts together. Like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And then I'm like, the recording's still going, so I better keep thinking. And it like almost forces me to like keep talking, and I just keep talking. And by the end of it, I almost come upon like, okay, well, you know what? I'm at this point just ranting. Like this is just emotions. I'm fine. Or like, if it's an actual problem, oftentimes I just talk so long that I'll come to a conclusion on my own. And for me, that almost helps better than writing, because I overthink when I write, but I can talk real fast, as I'm sure all of you guys listening and or watching can tell. But it's really important to check in with yourself, and whether you are your main support system, or if you have others, right? Finding those things that bring you that joy and planning it throughout this week. And newsflash, after your exam. A lot of what we're going to talk about is how to prep for your exam in the week leading up. I'm here to tell you that what you do the night of your exam can also change your test day experience. Like for me, I love to be around others. I had several friends that I basically didn't see for a couple months before I took my test because I was working almost full time and I was studying, trying to pay bills, trying to do all this stuff. So I got all my friends together and I'm like, you guys, I have no idea if I'm going to come home and I'm going to just want to cry and curl up into a little ball, or I'm going to come in and bust through the door and say, what? But I'm like, please just come over and deal with whatever happens. And in those moments of feeling fear during my exam of like, oh my God, this is the exam. This is scary. I was like, well, no matter what happens, I've got something to look forward to after this. It actually helped me calm myself down, not only a week prior, but also during my exam, just knowing that I had something special to do right after my exam. Did you have anything like that, Azaii, that you did?
So out of the two of us, I'm very much the more introverted of the two of us. I got home from testing and I kind of knew in my case that I wasn't going to have the bandwidth for anything that night, or that immediately after my test. I knew that maybe, I may or may not have the bandwidth at, that particular night rather than afternoon, but that weekend I probably would. I'd be myself again. So I got home from test day and I knocked out. So I lived in the dorm with my best friend. I really lucked out in that case. And so, you have those like small dorm beds in a double. And so we share a room. And I remember I came home. She wasn't home. And I like face planted on the bed and my legs were still dangling. And I don't know how long after I woke up, but my legs were still dangling. They were a little numb. But afterwards, I was just like half on the bed asleep. But afterwards, I remember we got pizza just because that was my like comfort food. And I, going out and doing something big for me would have been a lot just because I really need that time to recharge. But like that one-on-one with someone that I knew cared about me and that I cared so much for and care, I should say, present tense, was like kind of for me the planning that made it okay, I can do this. And I think what you're saying is so important, like have something to look forward to, right? Because that can change your test day experience. You go from I don't know what I'm doing with my life if you're like me and you have some existential crisis to okay, this marks the end of an era. Right? This marks the end of studying. For some people, that's a few months. For some people, that's over a year, right? And it's that closing of the chapter, but it's also the opening of a new chapter. And this is a way to honor that, having kind of like a bookmark where you can say, I'm going to see my friends no matter what kind of mood I'm in, right? Or, maybe for you, it's like nowadays, I think it would be like playing video games. With some friends remotely, if I'm being honest, I think that's what it would probably be these days.
That sounds ideal.
But like have something. Yeah. Like have something. And it doesn't, that's going to be something different for everyone, but have something planned. To look forward to.
Totally. And recognizing how unique you are in this moment is also really important, right? Which is kind of what we're hitting on with journaling or with, talking to yourself in a voice message or whatever you're doing, chatting with a friend, right? Try and figure out where you are in this moment, because my experience leading up to the MCAT is very different from Azai's experience, which is very different from Phil's experience, and everyone who has ever taken the MCAT. Again, a stressor is going to amplify however you're feeling before. So it's important to recognize how unique your story is and try and find a way within the next week to honor that, unique nature that you have, that unique story that you have, and ultimately basically just keep keep going with the momentum that you've already built in your MCAT prep, right? You don't want to be speeding up like crazy at this time, right? We want to make sure, basically, more than anything, we allow ourselves to feel whatever emotions that we're feeling. We allow ourselves to come back to a happy medium, and we prevent, right? I guess kind of a crashing and burning if you're sprinting towards it too fast.
Yeah. And kind of something that I want to pause really quickly and say is, do this before, like, this is the kind of thing, making those plans that you can start thinking about as soon as this podcast ends, right? It doesn't have to be something that you think about, and it probably shouldn't be, the night before, because then you don't want to scramble to make plans and then get stressed trying to make plans, right? So kind of pause after you finish listening to this podcast and just be like, what do I actually want to do? And that way, you're setting yourself up for keeping a calmer pace the entire week, right? Because like you're saying, the last thing we want to do is crash and burn. And I know I'm someone that has very much burned myself out on multiple occasions.
Too true.
Yeah. And so being able to recognize that we all have limits, right, is important. And how do we make sure that we don't crash and burn? Some people really like planning. So I think we fall in that category. Phil has very, very openly shared that he's not as much of a planner, which is probably why the three of us balance each other out the way that we do. But find a plan for you, whether it's like super detailed, whether it's more relaxed, and kind of sit down and say, okay, what will the next few days look like for me? And be realistic about what you plan. So, sometimes we're like, oh, this isn't too much. I can handle this. And so we try not to burn ourselves out, but then we might end up not being realistic and then accidentally doing that. So I would actually say, allow more to schedule more time than you think you need to for everything that you plan on doing. And that way you have that buffer, and whatever, kind of whatever happens, you have that extra time, that flexible wiggle room in case you need it. And that's a way to make sure that you're pacing yourself and you don't burn out the week before test day. Because if you've gotten this far and you are a week away from test day, you are capable of doing this, right? You have put in so much work. I doubt anyone who's actually listening to the podcast started studying 2 weeks ago and is planning on testing in a week, right? Or without having a lot more background in something. And so the work that you put in is real. And you want to give yourself the best chance of success on test day. And how do you do that? By pacing yourself, by figuring out, all right, what can this week reasonably look like? And maybe we can talk about some of the things that we should be focusing on kind of concretely the week of test day.
For sure. And I love that you took a moment just to say, congratulations, you guys. You are so close to that thing that you've been prepping for so long. And part of that is like, oh my God, I'm so close. And that's scary. The other part is, oh my God, look at how far I've come with this. I'm this close. Like, I've been working for however long you've been working, right? It's a time to look back and say, wow, right? I just did all of this. Like you said, it's a beginning and it's an end, right? It's kind of the last chapter of your MCAT prep, but it's the very first chapter of what comes next, right? The application cycle, it's actually seeing your dreams materialize, getting secondaries, getting interviews, getting all of this stuff. Like, that is, you're closing the book on the MCAT in a lot of ways. But that just means you're going to pick up the next one, and you're going to pick up where you left off. And I think I speak for both of us. We are so, first of all, thankful that you're here chatting with us, but also so proud of you and the work that you put in. And I hope that you feel that, right? And hopefully feel that towards yourself as well. But like you said, right, we're not just here to give you a pep talk, although I could do that literally all day, cheer you guys on, right? We also want to give you guys some concrete things that we would recommend you focus on in this last couple days leading up to your test. So I'm a pretty firm believer that the last week of your test, basically you shouldn't save the highest yield, most complicated topic to learn for the first time 1 week before your exam, right? You're setting yourself up for failure because you're going to be sitting down and trying to master the cathode and the anode and all this crazy stuff with electrophoresis and think, oh my God, I didn't have enough time for this. This is scary, right? What you want to do instead is focus on reviewing the material that you know will be on test day and maybe that you struggled with in the past, right? Azaii and I both want to share amino acids. You guys go review the structure, go review the abbreviations. I know Phil would be shouting from the rooftops if we didn't mention it, right? Those things that you know are going to show up on your exam, and it's going to be a big part of your exam, right? Dedicate some time, review that material. Just look at it again. Oh, right, I forgot that one weird fact, or I forgot that structure has homology with this one, or whatever it is, right? You see it again, and it's nice just to be exposed to it before exam day. Same thing with equations, right? If you want to review your equation sheet for physics, right? That's pretty useful. Again, not trying to learn it for the first time, but just reinforcing and cementing the knowledge that you've been working on. Really nice. Same thing if you have study guides or flashcard decks, right? This is the time to review and to reinforce. And I think that will set you up on a pretty nice path for test day.
Yeah, I like thinking about this as consolidation, right?
Yep.
And what are those questions that you missed because of content that you forgot, but that you knew, right? Because those are the easier points to kind of get back. And so for some people, that might be enzymes. For some people, that might be amino acids, right? For other people, throw in any physics topic, maybe kinematics, right? You forgot that you had to break down the vectors, right? And you forgot to split it into X and Y, and you just threw some numbers into the equation. That's something that is high yield, but it's easy, right? To kind of remind yourself of that. And it's really this combination of, okay, what's high yield, but not just what I don't like or what I like, right?
Yeah.
It's what I actually still need to work on. And like you said, now is not the time to actually learn anything complicated, to learn anything new. Because if, let's say that you've been studying for 3 months, if you have not learned that topic in 3 months and you are still deer in headlights about it, chances are you're probably not going to learn it well and retain it the last week of your exam. So even if you put all of this work into something that has you deer in headlights right now, it's probably not where you're going to get the most points, right?
Yeah.
So you've put in all the hard work to also figure out where, if you've listened to any of the other podcasts or attended, any of the course sessions or anything like that, you've heard us talk about the importance of kind of data-driven review in the sense of, where am I truly weaker, right? And that combination of what's high yield. And I love this saying, and I think it's so important. And it's that a weakness is a strength you haven't cultivated yet, right? Like I try to live by that and remind myself of that every single time I forget something in the hospital. And this is the chance where you can lean into that, right? And just remind yourself, yeah, maybe I still have some weak areas, but I can still strengthen them. I can fine tune. I can make some small tweaks and get those points back because you've got it in you. It's just a matter of just reminding yourself of those small things that will get you, 2-3 extra points in each section.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we underestimate the power of forgetting.
Yes.
And ultimately, we talk about it a lot, right? It's a lot easier to learn something the second time and have it stick than to learn something the first time and have it stick. So, just refreshing yourself, right, on things that maybe it's been a while. It's been a while since you've done it. I think that makes perfect sense, right? So definitely something to keep your eye on, right? Whether it's reviewing material that you've created, study materials, whether it's, hopping into office hours and just listening to all the questions that other students are asking, or refreshing yourself on things that you missed on your most recent full length or whatever it may be, right? Take the time to kind of address the fears that you have as well, right? As the things that clearly are going to show up on test day. Do whatever you can to increase your mental state in this piece, right? You want to, again, getting your mind right. So important.
Yeah. And I really want to come back to what you said about material you've already created and study guides. I am a huge fan of study guides and review sheets. If you haven't already been making some, the week of test day is probably not time to create them.
Yeah.
But you've probably seen some, right? And you've probably found some and flashcards and, maybe some general notes that you took while you were studying, and you can still review those things. And part of why I didn't mention it earlier, and I wish I would have, when you were talking about recording, your thoughts out loud, one thing that I have always loved to tell students, and I think is really powerful, is when you're reviewing, talk through it out loud. Yeah. And so,
love it.
When you're thinking about, okay, like I always use enzymes as an example. I'm not sure why. But like when you're going through enzymes, talk through the different types of, like what are the properties of an enzyme and what are the different types of enzyme inhibition, and talk through it out loud. And then you'll be able to hear when you pause and aren't quite as sure about something, right? You might be more likely to pick up on, oh, wait a second. I think I might get that wrong. Let me double check, right? Mm-hmm. It's also the kind of thing that you can review with someone else. Just give them some notes and be like, just make sure I talk about these things. They don't have to know all about enzyme inhibition. But if you've already, made some sheets or some notes or something, you can hand to someone who's willing to just be there and kind of listen. I've had people who say that they talk to their pets. And that is also a thing, to stuffed animals. And I don't remember if it was, at this point, it's been so long, but someone put up like not a picture, but like a drawing of like a person on their wall and just talked to this little drawing. And it's like, there's so many ways to get creative about it. But there's something special about talking through things out loud, and that's for calming yourself, and it's also for studying. It's a great way to kind of reinforce that. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm working through something, it's almost like I can hear it in my head when I'm like answering a question or trying to think about something. I'm like, it's like rattling in my mind, and it's almost like I can hear it, right? There's something really powerful about that kind of audible component.
Oh, totally. And that just, the reason why I laughed, it's not because that's funny. It's just because I've heard students, and I've heard them say this about you and also about me and also about Phil and all of our other instructors, of like, oh, every time I do a CARS passage, Azaii, I can hear her voice in my head, or like anytime I suddenly am dealing with the signaling pathway in biochem, like I can hear Molly screaming like, like, just draw it out. Like it just always is so funny as an instructor, because of the power of words, right? And the power that you can have. That's true directed at yourself as well. If you keep telling yourself things like, hey, I got this, or hey, don't forget about this, you'll hear it on test day, which is a pretty special experience. I think even more so if this is you hearing your own voice, right, in your head, trying to calm yourself down or to remind you of something important. I absolutely love that. So we've talked a lot about like, the content now, what we should be doing, like what should we be doing cognitively to reinforce this knowledge, to consolidate. That being said, there are other like sort of lifestyle things that you can do as well. And I'd love to know what you're thinking about this. Like what outside of actual MCAT studying and outside of, journaling or talking out loud, what else can we do to make sure that test day goes off without a hitch?
I think the first thing is making sure that you are motivated and you're maintaining that motivation. And I think the reason it ties into what we've been talking about, but it's also distinct in that it's really easy to kind of go one of two ways. Either first, almost slack, like I'm stressed, and then I get that kind of paralysis of I'm scared and I don't want to do anything, right? or to kind of, like we've talked about before, go into the flip side of that and get kind of try and do too much too quickly. But I think like with the motivation aspect, it's also a combination, and I it's not quite the same, but like meditation, right? And so coming back to this idea of how are we going to get in that right mindset, finding something that for you is calming is really important. And so like you were saying, this kind of lifestyle thing for people that looks differently. And we weren't planning on doing this, but I want to do like a mini meditation if you're up for it.
I tell Azaii all the time, you guys, that she has the most calming voice. I feel like my voice has too much energy in it. Like, I feel like I would never be good at motivation. I could never do something like that because it's going to distract you. Azaii, please lead us through some motivation. This will make my entire life. Let's do it.
Molly, you can't say that. You know that I like enjoy talking with you so much, and now I'm going to be laughing the entire time.
Okay.
We might have to come back
sad.
No, not at all.
Okay. Something neutral.
Whatever you're doing right now, maybe don't close your eyes if you are driving, right? Maybe don't close your eyes if you are, at the gym or doing something where it's really, you have to be engaged. But just kind of pause and take a moment to feel your breath, feel it coming in the cool air, just kind of washing over. And then when you breathe out, feel the warmth of that air coming out, whether it's of your nose or your mouth. And again, breathing in and out. And find your own pace. Doesn't have to be the same pace that we're going at, but really tune into your breath. Tune into the feelings that you have and how your heart, maybe it's slowing down as you're going through this. And take a moment and feel your feet grounded wherever you are. And scan your body and come up, and wherever you feel that there's tension, tighten and let go. In your shoulders, that's where a lot of us hold it, tighten and let go. And take one more breath cycle in and out, and come back to and recognize that you have so much potential and you have put in so much work. You are capable of doing a fantastic job on test day. Hold steady, hold the course, and you've got this. You can totally do this. I might cry. You guys taken a moment and done.
That was beautiful. Thank you on behalf of everyone who just heard that. That was amazing. That was really special to behold. I'm going to be playing that every single day for the rest of my life. It's amazing. Thank you for that. It's unplanned, but it's so nice to be able to calm yourself. You know, if you're watching, you saw me just do that, and I was like trying not to smile because I was like, this is so nice. Like, I'm supposed to be relaxed, but I'm so happy, right? That was beautiful. Maybe play that and right as you're walking into your exam.
Oh, no. But the idea with that is that like motivation comes in different forms. And I think when we hear meditation, we think, something like that, something more traditional. But those two things can be tied together, right? Pausing and seeing where you are and then tying that in with, I know I can do well. That that's decreasing your sympathetic nervous system, right? And it's creating those more positive associations with the MCAT. And it's going to create those more positive associations when you take those deep breaths on test day because you're stressed, right? Now you've done those kind of small moments where you remind yourself, yes, I'm capable of doing well while I'm, kind of either scanning my body, releasing some tension, breathing in and out. And so when you're doing those things on test day, breathing in and out, right? Paying attention to where you're at, then it's almost subconscious, that connection that has been made and that gets reinforced. And it's like small things like that we can take for granted, but are lifestyle things that we can do starting today and leading up until test day.
Absolutely. And I think,
what else you want to do?
What?
Oh, I said, what else are you going to have us do? What else do you want us to do? That's important the week of.
Good question. I mean, I have to take a second and just echo that on test day, not just before test day, on test day, if you're feeling overwhelmed. I did it myself.
Yeah.
I remember being absolutely exhausted, going into psych soc and just feeling like I'm just clicking through questions. Like I'm just tired. And I remember just saying, you know what? I don't care if this takes me 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's worth the time. I just did exactly what you talked about. I didn't have the skills at that time to lead myself through, like muscle relaxation or anything special, but I just shut my eyes and I just focused on my breathing. And yeah, it burned maybe a minute, 2 minutes on my test, but it was worth it because I opened my eyes and I was like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. And even if it takes 5 minutes, you guys, it's worth it because if you go through the test scared and at high anxiety mode, right? You're not giving yourself the fullest chance. And that I'm going to use as a segue because there's another thing that we really, really cannot sacrifice in this week leading up to the test, but also especially, I'm going to say this again, especially the night before your test. I feel like it must be obvious at this point. The answer is sleep. Please sleep, you guys. Mm-hmm. The amount of people that I know that pulled all-nighters before their test, it breaks my heart. Get your sleep, right? Remember how important sleep is for memory consolidation, right? At the very least. Mm-hmm. Also, think of the fact that if you're sleep deprived enough, you're more impaired than someone who's legally drunk. Like, just give yourself the chance to perform the way that you've been practicing for so long. Sleep is a huge impact on your mental and emotional preparedness. Even if you have all the knowledge in the world, sleep can it can help or it can hurt. Make sure to get enough sleep, my friends.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. Would you want your doctor to come in and not have slept the night before and be deciding what tests to run, what medications to give you, what you have? No. I don't know about you, but I would be really upset if my doctor came in and was trying to do all of those things on no sleep. Right. I'd be like, how do I know that you are like actually thinking about this properly? Mm-hmm. Right. And so we have to hold ourselves to that as well and recognize, like you were saying, that sleep is important for memory. Sleep is important for being at your, being on top of things and at your A game. And I think that a lot of us, and I say this as someone who it's taken me so long to kind of figure out how much sleep I actually need. Many of us think, okay, we hear 8 hours, we hear 7 to 8 hours, and that must be it, right? But don't assume that that's what you actually need. If you're just a week out from test day, especially if, maybe you still have 2 weeks before test day, if you can manage it, go to sleep earlier than you normally do and see what time your body wakes you up. And if, you feel rested, that's how long you actually need to sleep. For some people, right, that's 6 hours. For some people, that's 9 hours. For some people, that might be 7.5 hours. Why am I saying these numbers? Because they're multiples of 90 minutes. And as we know, sleep cycles generally occur in 90-minute intervals. So that's why I always hear that. I'm like, 8 hours is such a weird time to tell people, because if you actually slept 8 hours, that would wake you up mid-cycle, right? And granted, it's not perfect 90-minute sleep cycles, but it's kind of, something, a general rule of thumb. And so find the actual amount of sleep that you need to feel rested. And maybe that means going to bed 2 hours earlier than you're used to the last week of your, leading up to your exam. And that's okay, because that sleep, like you're saying, it's going to be worth its weight in gold, in points.
Totally. One other thing that I want to throw in here, I didn't think about this before, but also just to give everyone a heads up, right? MCATs start in the morning. If you are a night owl and you usually study at 3 a.m., we got to change it. You got to make sure that, and this you could start as early as you can, right? You got to make sure that your mind is awake and ready when you sit down to take it. That also, another thing that I want to touch on here that I wasn't really planning on is caffeine. If you are someone who drinks 5 cups of coffee a day, don't skimp and don't overdo it on test day, right? If you never drink caffeine, don't do it for the first time on test day. Literally, your test day experience should be your exact routine that you've had for forever. Don't do anything super unusual. Get yourself ready for this as early as possible, because like I said, if you don't have sleep and you have way too much caffeine, you are going to introduce so many variables that could influence your score. And we don't want that, especially if you're scoring in a area, right? A range that you're comfortable with. Eliminate as many variables as physically possible. And that also ties in with eating, right? Drinking in terms of caffeine. I would probably stay away if you drink alcohol, if you do anything like that. Don't do it right before test day. But even something as simple as eating, make sure that you're getting enough food, especially if you are someone who does drink a lot of caffeine. That can dull your appetite. Make sure that you are nourishing your body, because your body is not feeling right. It's really hard for your mind to feel right and your emotions to feel right. They're all very connected, you guys. So take this time, do what you need to nourish your mind, your emotions, and your body, basically.
Yeah. And it doesn't just go for test day. It goes for that whole last week, because that's really what we've been emphasizing, right? If you don't normally drink coffee, don't just avoid coffee on test day. Avoid it the week of your exam, right? That goes back exactly to what you were saying, Molly. Eliminate as many variables as you can.
Yeah.
Keep things as controlled as possible.
Yes.
On this topic of kind of what you're eating, don't just think about like how often you're eating and the size of meals, but also think about like what it is you're eating. So for example, if, all you eat is toast on test day, that is a very quickly metabolizing carbohydrate. That is not going to sustain you very long, and it's not going to be feeding your mind as much, right? So try and find, because then you're just using all those carbs right away. So try and find something that's balanced. Try and make sure that whenever you're having a snack, whenever you're having your meals, if you're having breakfast because you're a breakfast person like me, make sure that, you've got some carbs. Maybe look for something a little slower release. Throw some protein in there, some fats, right? And try and have something that's as balanced as possible so you can have that slower release energy. Totally. And you're not crashing mid cars. I like to say cars because it's that section where you're not quite halfway, but maybe you're coming off of a stressful chem phys section. And so that snack between the two can be very helpful. And this is going to sound really silly, but I think the snacks can also be motivating. So, for sure. Like, something is coming and you're going to treat yourself a little bit. And so finding snacks that are fun. Like for me, I really, in the hospital, I've really been enjoying like clementines, but also like the little mozzarella cheese sticks, the string cheese.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's a fun little snack that, I'm stressed. I'm like going and, seeing patients and learning all the things I don't know. And then I have a little cheese stick, right? A little string cheese with some clementines, or a clementine, right? And it's like, it's a little boost. Oh, speaking of which, citrus kind of wakes us up. Peppermint can wake us up. And so those might be things that you incorporate in your snacks. Cinnamon, right, is another one that when you're thinking about, okay, what can we add into the mix leading up right beforehand? Perhaps do this 2 weeks out because you don't want to introduce too many new variables like we've been talking about. But those are things that can, if you're still 2 weeks out, start adding them and seeing how it goes. And if it goes well, you've got something that can help you on testing.
There you go. Yeah, I also had my little snacks. I always love an apple, like an actual apple, not apple slices, an actual apple and a little bit of peanut butter, just because I think it's fun to eat. Like if you like take a bite and then you have a little peanut butter, like it's like, it just, the like routine of it to get a nice mix of both, it always chilled me out. I had that on test day. And maybe it helps to think about this. Like for me, every single break that I took, no matter what, whether it was lunch and I had more time or the short breaks, get up, go to the bathroom, just do it. You don't want to have to pee in the middle of the test section. Went to the bathroom, grabbed my snack from the locker and went and sat outside and just ate stared into the abyss, got my mind right. But right before going back in, I always did a handful of jumping jacks, right? I was just like, okay, this is going to release. I mean, I'm someone who loves exercise. That's something that like helps me refocus. Okay, that's done. That was like my break time's over, focus time. And that probably isn't exercise for most of you guys, but first of all, exercise can really help. Endorphins, it increases your mood. It's amazing. Do it. But also, thinking of if there are nice start and stop points on your breaks to get your head back in the routine. It's almost like, brushing your teeth at night makes you kind of tired because you always do it right before you go to bed, or whatever it is. You start a routine. And when you start that routine in the evening or in the morning or whatever, it reminds you, oh, this is what's going to come. That's what I did for my breaks. And that was something that really helped me.
Yeah. And this is something that, like you're saying, it's really helpful on test day. It's also helpful leading up.
Exactly.
Because it's also going to just kind of help you calm down, and this is not the time to suddenly start hitting the gym if you are not a gym person, right? Again, we're trying to minimize all the big changes as much as possible.
Get to know
go out for a walk. Yeah, it's getting warmer in most places up here, and we're in summer mode, you guys. And so maybe you just take a 5-minute walk before you start studying every day, because maybe on test day you can take a 5-minute walk in front of the test center, right? You can kind of walk in place, because that's something that you can do during test day. And those are things that you can start doing now. And it really just, like you were saying, helps with your mood, helps with your concentration, helps circulate your blood. Because if you think about it, right, you're going to be sitting for an hour and a half. And so inevitably, you're not going to have as strong circulation as when you're moving around. Why? Because when you're moving, the muscles in your legs are contracting and they're helping push the blood back to, your heart and then eventually your brain. And so those small bits of movement can make a really big difference. And so getting in your exercise the week of your exam, on your actual test day, just those small little things can be really helpful. I had a student who went into the bathroom to do jumping jacks. And I think that makes sense too, right? Because maybe you don't feel comfortable like doing them in front of other people. If like, I remember on my test day, the testing room was like on some top floor. And so going out of the building wasn't like really feasible. Whereas for some of the exams I've taken later on, the test room has been on the first floor and they actually do allow you to leave the room. And so in those cases, I could see sunshine. In the first case, I couldn't see the sunshine. And so just recognizing that might be different depending where your test location is. So be flexible with that.
Yeah. And make sure to check out where your test center is before you get there. I can't believe I haven't mentioned that yet. Drive there, figure out how long it takes to get there. Make sure that you're close by so that, there's not an accident. That means you miss your test or whatever, get as close as you can to it. Make sure that you're comfortable with the route to get there. Make sure you leave with plenty of time. You don't want any surprises when you get there. I
remember it told us to get there 30 minutes early. I told myself I was going to get there an hour early, so that I would actually get there 45 minutes early because, But I remember when I was testing, there was one test center that was like East whatever street, and there was one that was like West whatever street. Either it was North and South or East and West. And this is why we have, this is why we say check it ahead of time and know where you're going. If you're going to take the bus, definitely plan to take like a bus that's early. A couple of like routes ahead. So for example, if the bus normally passes at 6, 6:15, 6:30, and 6:30 would be the one that gets you there on time, then take the one that's at 6:00, right? That way, in case it's running late, the 6:15 will get you there, and then you have the 6:30 as a backup. And just kind of have that planned out. And that gives you some time to just kind of relax and cool off before you actually get into the test center if you do get there early. I can't believe we haven't said this either, but you have to make sure, and now a week out from testing is the perfect time to do it, that you have a valid ID. Make sure, make sure
goodness.
that it's not just valid, that it is not expired.
Yes.
Okay. That is incredibly important. And these are the kinds of things that you can have already. If you're at home studying the last few days, you're going to school and you don't need your ID, have it somewhere where you can see it every day so you don't forget it on test day. Make sure that, this is something that I've started doing when I know I'm going to have a stressful week. Pick out what you're going to wear ahead of time, and pick something comfy, right? Something that isn't too hot, something that isn't too cold, and that just kind of feels comfortable, and have that out, and just kind of plan those small things ahead of time the week of your exam. And it's going to make the night before your exam a little less stressful. The morning of your exam, definitely less stressful. But as much as you can kind of set out for yourself the night before, 2 nights before, and the fewer decisions you have to make the morning of test day, the better.
Yeah. I packed an MCAT go bag. I had to travel for my MCAT because my testing center was like an hour and a half from where I was living at the time. So I got an Airbnb right next to it, just a private room. And I had packed everything I needed and just had it all there for me in the morning. I had already, gotten my favorite snacks from Trader Joe's. I had it all ready in a bag. I just woke up, grabbed the stuff I had already laid out for myself, put it on, grabbed that bag, and walked out of the door. And that was it. And I was like, this is so nice. I watched the sunrise. I was like, this is beautiful. This is great. I'm a big nature person. So that was a good thing for me to see, to get my mind right. I think at this point now we've covered all of the important things. I think we're good. Is there anything else, any last pieces of advice that you want to leave our audience here with? Things that they can do to get their mind right, or get their body right, or their brain right, right before their exam.
Take one more deep breath. You've made it this far. You have put in so much work. You've done what you needed to do, right? And continue doing it. Remember that you are so much more than a number.
Yes.
You are so much more than an MCAT score that's one piece of your application. And you have so many qualities to you that are worth celebrating. And if you haven't had the chance to tap into those things as much while you've been studying for the MCAT, remember and recognize that this is closing one chapter and it's opening another. And remind yourself of who you are outside of the MCAT, and set up those plans. Take another deep breath and remind yourself that you are amazing and you can do this.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself.